The Louisville Cardinals will have one of the best running back duos in the country.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is year number 5 of covering U of L for me, and year number 3 hosting this show. Man, I'm getting old, but it's about to be year 6 beginning in August. Man, I feel even more old, but regardless, we're continuing along in our football position preview series, now going on to the running backs and to talk about the dangerous running back position group that the Cardinals have. We're bringing in the state of Louisville's Keith Arutoff back onto the show today. Keith, what's going on, man?
Oh, another day in, what was oppressively hot Louisville up until a couple days ago, I guess. So
I never know. I was like, do I keep going? Because every time somebody says something about, like producer Keith, it's never Keith Arutoff. It's always producer Keith.
I got a brand.
Man, the brand is growing. But speaking of brand, Louisville is starting to become RBU. Potentially, it seems the Cardinals will have one of the best running back duos in the country this year with Isaac Brown and Duke Watson. We'll discuss how much the Cardinals will actually run this year compared to the first 2 years of Jeff Brom's tenure. What is the role going to look like for Keyjuan Brown and true freshman Jamarice Wilder, and much more on this jam-packed episode for today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. So, Keith, this is something that really doesn't need an introduction because we've all been thinking the same thing. The Cardinals retaining Isaac Brown and Duke Watson for their respective sophomore seasons was a huge offseason victory for the Cardinals. At this point, when you talk about top duos across the country, you've got the guys over at Penn State. You've got the guys over at Notre Dame. Singleton and Allen at Penn State. Was it Price and Love over at Notre Dame? Those are the only two that, I literally think you could put over Louisville at this point, Keith, in my opinion.
Those are definitely the two that sort of jump off first. And I think Louisville's right there in that. If those two were like the number 1 tier, then Louisville's right there in tier 2. I think there are a couple other programs that have really good tandems. If you really wanted to make a stink and fuss and argue about it, like Texas A&M, they've got a trio of nasty running backs over there. Texas always has a good running back core, but we aren't Texas. We aren't Texas and Oregon shows. We're a Louisville show. Yeah, we got the best duo in the country. These kids are electric. The thing I'm most excited about, everyone, obviously a full season of Isaac Brown, electric. Duke Watson was a freaking light show last year. He barely got any touches, and
look what he did.
I think it was 1 every 9 carries. He broke over 20-yard run was the average for him, which is just insane. So a lot of elite playmaking ability between those two. And then just before we talk a little bit later on the show, we got a couple mean running backs right behind them too. So it's going to be a fun one.
It's weird because it's not like 2023 where you had your speed guy with Jawar Jordan, and then you followed it up with also speedy, don't get me wrong, but your power back in Isaac Garendo. It's pretty interesting because you mentioned 2024. It took Isaac Brown some time to be that bell cow, right? He just really made the most out of his opportunities. Now he benefited from Maurice Turner going down. Don Chaney had some injury issues, but even when he played, didn't really impress all that much. But that makes what Isaac Brown did more impressive. Broke the true freshman rushing record set by Lamar Jackson into the year. 165 carries for 1,173 yards and 11 touchdowns, average 7 yards per carry. Keith, is there a reality where we might be putting a little bit too much pressure on Isaac Brown going into this year?
So as a fan base, I've noticed Louisville fans really can put the cart before the horse, like the Isaac Brown for Heisman campaign going on Twitter and things like that.
What do you mean?
maybe pump the brakes on saying he's a Heisman favorite. I think he's going to be a fantastic running back, but I also believe that this room is so deep that you might not see that 2,000-yard season from Isaac Brown just because we don't have to use him that much.
Yeah, I mean, you keep them fresh, and that's kind of been like the MO of you go back to like the Bobby 1.0 days at the end, and you had just sort of a rotation of running backs. Even in Satterfield's time, I don't like to speak a lot on that time, but there was a rotation clearly at running back, and it seems like that's the name of the game here is just making sure that regardless of who's in, they're fresh and they're ready to go. And ready to go was the mantra for Duke Watson last year. I mean, I don't hate it. Let me preface this by saying I don't hate it, but I hate it for Duke because this guy's a top running back in the ACC. He's just not getting those carries like last year. I mean, he had 67 carries, like you said, basically 9 yards a carry, 597 yards and 7 touchdowns. And it took a while for him to start getting more carries. But at the end, I mean, it was just give it to Brown, big game. Give it to Duke, big game. I think that this is a breakout year for Duke more so than it is Isaac for me.
Only because Isaac took the nation by storm.
Exactly.
So there's not much left he can surprise people with. Duke Watson's going to surprise a lot of people this year because unless you were a Louisville fan or unless he was gashing your team, you didn't know the speed this kid has. So you're going to see basically a 1A, 1B sort of tandem, I think, between these two. What'd they go by last year? Sonic and Knuckles, I think was what they were doing last
year. I like that. It's kind of like the Detroit Lions play that I guess that's what the Lions did, wasn't it? I forget who was
Might
who.
be. Yeah. I mean, we got two guys who are fast, and we got our mean power back sitting at 3 on a depth chart, technically, who I also think is going to see a lot more this year compared to previous seasons.
And one thing that encourages me too is that like last year, it was intriguing because again, it took a while. Like Maurice Turner was the go-to guy through the fall, leading up to that first game, and then he got hurt. And at that point, you had to go down the list. It was Don Chaney's turn. Kiwan Brown got some early snaps in some early games too. The Cardinals really didn't play a good team until Georgia Tech, and then finally you get to where slowly but surely Isaac Brown is getting more touches, but it took a while. Now there's no limitations. You're going to Isaac, you're going to Duke. What do you think if you had to look at the splits there? Let's say that, like, what would you think that the splits would be between the running backs if you had to break it down by a percentage?
Okay, so if we're doing a percentage, I'd say probably 40% Isaac, then like 35% Duke, and then the remainder go into Keyjuan and Jamarice, maybe Shemai if we get a little banged up and need to work. And that's assuming we keep everyone healthy all season.
Exactly.
So that's sort of how I'd break it down. And we mentioned Notre Dame earlier, so I was kind of looking at their rushing splits for a bit of comparison. Obviously, you have to factor Riley Leonard out of the equation because they built the offense around him running the ball predominantly last year. But you saw a pretty even split between Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price last year at Notre Dame, with Love getting the rock, I think, only like 20 or 30 more carries throughout the course of the season. So I could see something along those lines where maybe Isaac ends the year with 20, 30, maybe 40 if they stay healthy the whole year, rushes than Duke. And then Duke having maybe 50, 60 more carries than Keyjuan.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I also kind of look at like the Ohio State thing. Now, two different types of backs there with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, but they were used. I mean, one was used more than the other at times, but it was never consistent. Like it was, I'm going to feed the hot hand. I'm going to go with the matchups. And that could be kind of what Louisville decides to do this year. But I think one of the main questions now is, well, how much is Jeff Brom actually going to run the football? Well, Jeff isn't going to run the football, but you of course, know what I'm saying. How much will the Cardinals run? We're going to bring up some historical data from the past 2 seasons to help us answer this when we come back on this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Card Nation, today's episode of the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. If you ever wish managing your money felt easier, well, now you have the trick. With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a large purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. It also allows you to set goals. I'll tell you that one goal that I'm working to do this year is I want to go to a college football playoff game, and I'm hoping that the Louisville Cardinals will be playing in that game, so it makes sense for me to do so. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONCollege for half off of your first year. Card Nation, thanks again for making us your first listen of the day throughout the month of July. Gosh, it's already halfway through 2025. Look, Keith, I'm not all about wishing life away, but I'd be okay if things start going a little bit quicker so we can get closer to football. And, partially due to how good this running back committee is going to be for the Cardinals. And I looked at the historical data to kind of predict how much Louisville is going to run. In 2023, give me a guess, Keith. I don't know if you've looked this number up or not, but what do you think the breakdown was? Passing plays to running plays. What do you think that split looked like?
So I remember seeing stats about it shortly after the season ended. You said 2023, correct? Where that was the most run-heavy Jeff Brom had ever been in his head coaching career. And I believe I think it was close to 60% run to 40% pass, if I remember correctly.
It was close. They threw the ball 45.3%.
Okay, 55-45.
But that number jumped up. I mean, for a couple of different reasons. In 2024, you look at that number of passing plays. They threw it 50.75%, which was 42nd in the country. That's why you slow everybody down when they say that it's an air raid offense, because it is 1,000% not. It's as close to a pro offense as they come in college football. But there's reasons that you have to look deeper than the surface level. Like, who's your quarterback? Can you mask over some of the quarterback's issues? In 2023, you couldn't a lot, so you had to run the ball more. 2024, you have a better quarterback. You're giving up more points in 2024 because you're playing better teams. Got to throw the ball more there. I think that, Keith, it's like you said, it's going to look more so like 2024 than it would 2023, in my opinion.
Yeah, I am curious what the stats look like. So I assume the run numbers are going to be a bit inflated after the first 3 games of the season. Yeah. Of course, we had Indiana on the schedule. They bought out of that game, so we had to scramble. So we have essentially 3 bye games on the schedule. So the run numbers, fingers crossed, if all goes well, our running numbers are going to be a bit inflated after those games because we're going to be artificially pumping the run game. Once we get into league play, though, it's tough to predict because I'm fascinated how teams are going to try and defensively scheme for us, because Isaac Brown ain't no secret, but Miller Moss, we as a quarterback, and the fact that we've assembled a really talented top 4 wide receiving core over the course of this offseason. You have Colin Lacey, you got Chris Bell, you added Trey Shunhurry, Dakari Collins as well. Chris Hughes was pretty darn good in the slot, especially as a walk-on. That kid was electric. He earned a non-49 number. So it's really going, like, the offense is in a fantastic place where essentially, okay, you're going to stack the box. We're going to throw it. And then, you're going to bail out of the box. Cool. Now we can beat your face in with the run game. Yeah. So, like, I think the most aggressive take I have about this team is, like, we might have a top 10 scoring offense in the country because we're very well-rounded and very balanced.
And I think that, again, I hate that I keep bringing this up, but I have to, because what I saw last year does not instill confidence in me that losing the talent that you lost, that your defense is going to be that much better. Like, I have to see it. I have to see it. So I could see a reality where, yes, you dodge a couple teams that you played last year. There is no Notre Dame, which you handled them actually pretty decently anyway. But Miami doesn't have Cam Ward and all those guys anymore. SMU is going to be tough. Clemson's probably going to be better. ACC still kind of in that flux of, well, what in the world are we expecting to see? I think the class, I think you and I would agree with this, is a better overall quarterback class than it was a year ago. But at the same time, I still feel like the Cardinals are going to have to score a good amount of points to win games. So that could take away some of those rushing numbers because you're still throwing the ball a decent amount.
Yeah, I mean, it's a frustrating situation because, like you mentioned, like we don't have, and I know they came off a 2-win season, so it's hard to take them seriously, but you don't have the talent pool that Florida State has. You dodging them. Georgia Tech has assembled a nice roster. We finally don't have to play them for the first time in what feels like forever.
Man. Thank goodness.
But at the same time, you look at the ACC slate we have, and if everyone's offseason predictions and prognostications are right, we don't have a single bad team that we play against in league play. The worst ACC team on our schedule is probably Cal, and they're still going to be pretty solid. Like Ron Rivera, he sort of got thrown into GM duty over there. He's done a really good job. He's done a good job salvaging that program and getting it into a state where they're not going to be sorry. So it's a weird one. It'd be a nice break, man, because this ACC slate's tough. Like
this is the first time that we go to Blacksburg,
which is wild, by the way. We've been in the league 10 years.
10 years. You played Virginia Tech twice.
And they're geographically the closest team in the conference.
You played what was it? Hendon Hooker on the Hokies the last time they played? It was like 2020 or 2021. I think Hendon Hooker was on that team.
No, because we played them in Louisville at 2020. I think it was my first year with season tickets. So it would have been 2022 because we just gave them the business. Because I remember wanting to really hoping the stadium.
We played them 3 times. Sorry, we played them 3 times because we smacked them that year when Kyron Drones was a freshman. But we played them before that. I want to say it was 2020, and they just tore us up. Yeah, 2020, they didn't tear us apart. They beat us by 7, but Hendon Hooker went off that game. Gosh. Anyway, I kind of want to ask you this before we go into discussing those power backs. A lot of hot takes out there have become popular in the sense of some say that Louisville could have 2 1,000-yard rushers. Do you think, how realistic is that in your mind? They're hot takes for a reason, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but how realistic of a hot take is that?
I would be thrilled if that was the case. I think Duke Watson would have to have an electric season to make it happen, just because Isaac Brown's going to be the guy. He's going to get probably 30, 40, maybe even 50 more carries than Duke.
Yeah.
So he's going to get chances to go out there and make plays, but realistically, it's not fair to expect, almost 9 yards a carry from him, especially now that he's going to be a secret to the casual college football fan. He's not going to be a secret to coaching staffs. They're going to know. And also, we don't know how teams are going to play us. If teams are going to force us into being a passing team, then that's not an unreasonable expectation. Do we have the talent for it? Absolutely. Do I think it'll happen? I, on a scale of confidence, I'd probably say I'm about at a 4, but not impossible, probably improbable just because we only got 1 ball to hand out. So, but hey, I'd be thrilled to be wrong.
I guess one more question really, because we haven't really talked about the receiving aspect of quarterback play. Of course, Louisville aired it out a ton in 2024. The running back wasn't so much involved as much in the receiving game as they were in 2023. You look at those numbers in 24. Isaac Brown led all running backs with 152 yards. And right behind him was Don Chaney with 62. You had Duke Watson with 60 and Kewan Brown with 53. Do you think that it's going to be more of an added emphasis, even with the receivers that you have? Do you think that Louisville decides to factor the running backs more into that equation, or do you think that's sort of what we saw in 2024 is going to be kind of what we get in 25?
I think the only reason I think we see more of what we saw in 2024 is because that's just how the offense is schemed. It's going to be schemed to get a receiver open. If read A, B, and C aren't there, get the ball out. And if we're going against a team with an elite edge rusher, the back is probably going to be asked to protect more often than not. So you could see that. But to sort of make a case on the other side, Miller Moss is a guy who likes to stay regular. He does not take a lot of negative plays, even more so than what Tyler Shuck did last season, which is outrageous when you think about it. So if there's ever going to be a guy who's going to be more than happy to check it down to an elite athlete at running back, it's going to be Miller Moss. Do I think it's going to be the emphasis? No, because checking down at the end of the day is like, okay, well, our play design didn't work. Let's just get what we can. So who knows? I think we struggled a lot with the screen game last year. Now, this will sort of bleed into the O-line side of things. I think we got more mobile on the offensive line, so we could see more designed screens and set up plays to get our super fast duo of Watson and Brown open in space to make some things happen outside. All of that is a long-winded way of saying, who knows? Probably not, but it wouldn't shock me. Again, right in that like 4 or 5 level confidence out of 10.
I mean, we've got the guys to do it in the backfield with that speed, but don't get it twisted now, guys. We do have some power at the back end of that rotation. We're going to talk about Keyjuan Brown, what his role is going to look like, and how much of a factor will Jamarice Wilder be in his true freshman season. All that coming up on the final segment of this Wednesday edition of Locked On Louisville. Don't forget, guys, tomorrow, wide receivers preview. It's a long preview series, guys. Look, I know 10 episodes is a lot. Sometimes I'm sitting there beforehand like, dude, 10 episodes, but I promise it's worth it. We're going to get as analytical as we can. But second of 10 position previews, continuing with the running backs with Keith Arutoff of State of Louisville. Keith, we now go to the power backs. Kiwan Brown, last season, 47 carries, 243 yards, and 3 touchdowns, averaged about 5 yards a carry. Most of his work coming in the first 2 games of the season where he rushed over 50 yards. And after that, I mean, didn't really do much outside of that. Just the lack of a workload. He enters the portal and he rescinds his name to come back, which you got to love for the Atlanta native, who I think right now is at like 210, 215 pounds. I mean, he's going to be that guy that we sort of envisioned Don Chaney to be like, no?
That's exactly why we sort of saw that lack of carries, I think, for Kiwan. Is just because him and Don Chaney, especially by the end of last season, were filling a very similar role of sort of being that like guy you bring in like the third quarter to just start beating up the defense after halftime when they're starting to feel fatigued and get tired. And I think Kiwan Brown does a fantastic job of that. Like, he is such a violent runner. And like, if we're not, personal bias, he's my favorite running back in that backfield right now. I love the way that kid runs the ball.
And he also comes from like that Metro Atlanta area is such like a talent-rich area. There's so many good players that come from the 404, and even that pocket of Northwest Georgia to where Louisville's tried to recruit a ton. And I remember when they got his commitment, he was that flip from Purdue, 3-star that wasn't really getting all that heralded. I'm like, dude, this guy has the potential to really outplay his ranking. It's just at the same time, he's a victim of Isaac and Duke just being so good. And I really would like to see Kiwan featured in those short yardage situations that Louisville struggled with in 2024 and in the goal line.
So that is a spot that I feel like all Louisville fans found a lot of frustration with last year. Those short yardage situations where we're going to give Don Chaney the ball. We need 3 yards. We're going to get 2. We need 1 yard. We're going to get 2. So I would love to see Kiwan in those situations, but I also just want to see him get more regular carries incorporated as part of the game plan. Because, like, yes, Isaac and Duke are fantastic talents. You got to make them last a whole season. Like, you can't just run those guys into the dust by week 7 and expect to stay healthy. So I would expect him. And while we're here, Jamarice Wilder, really good spring from the true freshman. I wouldn't be surprised to see him start to get some rotation as well. I believe right now those are our only 4 scholarship guys in the running back room as of right now. So it sort of makes me feel like no one's going to have a true lion's share of the workload just because we're trying to keep these 4 guys healthy. Like, no, we have Shemai Gates as well, or Shay Gates. Shemai Gates.
He comes from a very prestigious male high school, where elite podcast hosts come from. I don't know what I'm talking about, but
like the kid's got talent, but like he's non-scholarship running back, and we've seen walk-ons have success. We would like to avoid that success story if possible by managing and maintaining the health and well-being. And we've got a quartet? I was just going to go with a mean stable of running backs to utilize. So all that to say, like, let's get Kiwan the ball in more like regular situation. Like, okay, second Nate, let's give Kiwan the ball. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, like I'm good with, I mean, you look at, he had 47 carries last year. I mean, he had, I think, more than 7 carries twice. I think that number jumps up a little bit. I'd be okay with 10 carries a game, truly, with Kiwan, just to keep guys fresh, because I hate to say it, knock on wood, but there's been seasons where the Cardinals have had multiple injuries to the running backs room. We just saw it last year. Don Chaney, Maurice Turner barely played at all. Don Chaney, I mean, couldn't stay healthy, and even Isaac Brown got banged up a little bit. So, I mean, you're doing your best to preserve the team. I think that Kiwan, Jamarice, and Shemai are going to get a good amount of run in those first 3 weeks. Really interested to see what Wilder's going to do, because, like you said, spring ball, he was really, really good. Had a couple of big-time plays in that spring game. And he comes from, again, an area where guys get overlooked. He's from Venice, Florida, 3-star guy, 5'9", 180 pounds, ranked outside of the top 1,000. He's got some decent offers. He's another player just like Kiwan Brown, maybe in a lower sense, that, man, I just like the film doesn't scream 1,100 ranked player. Like, this guy's like, I think he's going to outkick his coverage in terms of his ranking.
So I just need to get it out here now. Fans, when you see this kid come into the game this fall, I promise we did not sign professional running back Isaiah Pacheco to University of Louisville, but their running styles are almost so identical.
It's like he run. It's like you. I mean, it's like you set his jersey on fire and put it on him, and it's just. I
was going to say it's like you light his cleats on fire or something. He's just trying to stomp him out while also getting as much yardage as possible.
He will, like, you can, some guys give a lot of effort, like Derrick Henry, but it doesn't look like they're giving a ton of effort. And then there's Pacheco, and it looks like he's going 195% every time. And Wilder runs like that, and there's nothing wrong with it, by the way. It's intriguing how similar those two rushing styles are. Keith, one last question before we get out of here. When you talk about the top rushing attacks in America, do you think that this is, statistically speaking, there's a lot of context that goes into that, top 25, top 15, higher than that, lower than that?
I think we have the potential to be that high if Miller Moss lights the world on fire his first couple games in ACC play and teams start to pivot like, oh, crap, we've got to prepare for the pass when we play Louisville. Right. I just think with the overwhelming expectation that our running back tandem has coming into the season, teams are really going to try and gameplay and focus on that. So I think we're more likely to have a top 25 passing offense than we are a running offense.
I don't disagree.
For the sole reason of just taking what the opponent's going to give us.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think I'd probably say top 25 for sure. And it's not an indication of the lack of talent, of course. It's more so the context of, I think Louisville's going to throw the ball a pretty decent amount. I think there's the potential for top 15. Top 10 might be too rich. That's one of those to where, I mean, Louisville just completely, no team, even if they prepare for it, can stop it. And also like teams where that's the gimmick of their whole offense. Yeah.
Because, three of the top rushing teams statistically are going to be Army, Navy, Air Force. Just because that's their offense.
They love to pass the ball. They pass the ball 10 times a game, it feels like. And Notre Dame is still going to run the football a ton.
Penn State's going to run the ball a lot.
Penn State runs the ball a ton because their quarterback is vastly overrated, but that is beyond this conversation, Drew Holler. But, hey, running backs are going to be really, really good. It's going to be a fun season of running the football for the Cardinals. Keith, one more thing, Dad?
One quick thing. We didn't talk about it because he's technically a wide receiver, but we saw a little preview of it in the bowl game last season. Don't be shocked if we see a little Colin Lacey move to the backfield this year, just to sort of cater to the lack of full-blown depth in the backfield and just gimmick packages that we were able to unveil. The kid's an athlete. We might see him technically line up as a running back. So get a little Colin Lacey shout out in this episode
like
as well.
The Jalen Lucas special.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But that is going to wrap up this Wednesday edition of the show. We'll have Keith back on, hopefully, to talk offensive line, which is his forte as a former college offensive lineman. But everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here when we talk about Colin Lacey and those Louisville wide receivers. Go Cards.